This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
All right, now that we think we're recording and we're good to go, he's Greg, I'm Nick. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. And get this, for game one of the NBA Finals, Prize Picks has a Jason Tatum square. If Jason Tatum scores 1 point, one single solitary point, that square wins. Users, you must add it as part of your lineup before the timer ends, so you want to check that out. And finally, take the guesswork out of buying NBA or NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Greg, you were at OTAs today. It was the third OTA practice that you guys could take a look at. First of all, 30,000 feet. Your thoughts about Drake Maye's conversation with the media before you got to that practice?
I mean, I thought it was fine. I don't know if you're hinting at something that might have jumped out to you. It's interesting. Gerard, in the short time that we've had him in sort of this capacity, he doesn't mind like foreshadowing things and sort of dropping hints on what we're going to see at practice. That's I will say a welcome departure from before, where, it was Bill Belichick liked to treat us like fungus, keep us in the dark and feed us shit. And so Gerard, he's not afraid. He talked up Drake Maye a little bit, and so that sort of foreshadowed that he ended up getting the number 2 reps instead of Bailey Zappi in this practice. He talked about how it was going to be red zone heavy. One thing where there was a little bit of a disconnect is because he mentioned at one point about how in the red zone, people were asking about Alex Van Pelt and scheme and stuff like that. And Drake Maye said, you don't really see scheme. And this is something he has said before on multiple occasions until third down and red zone. That's where you really see the creativity of a play caller and an offense. Well, yeah. Let's just say that was not the case today for the Patriots offense. So a lot of work left to be done.
So Mayo talked to you guys, and then you had AVP, Alex Van Pelt, step to the mic, and he sounded pretty impressed by Drake Maye and the progression that the rookie has made. Your thoughts on Van Pelt's comments today? Yeah,
I thought they were good. I think that, we also have to remember, and it's not like I'm saying that, that Alex Van Pelt isn't telling the truth, but you do have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt, because Drake Maye was the 3rd overall pick. Probably a lot of these guys wanted the Patriots to take Drake Maye, so I don't exactly expect them to come out and say, holy crap, this guy has just not met our expectations whatsoever. He has stunk up the joint for the first month. So,
right.
It's good. I think that, when he talked about things about calling plays from the huddle, the rhythm, being in time with your feet, he said that Drake Maye is making strides. And I would say that is the case. I just do think that Drake Maye has a ways to go, but it's good to see him progressing. What you want to see out of a young quarterback especially is a guy who makes, even if it's incremental progress, steady progress in the right direction day after day. And it seems like that's what he's doing.
With that in mind, I know a lot of people, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, at least some people have made note of the quarterback rotations and how many snaps each guy is getting between 11 on 11s and 7 on 7s. Today, there was a bit of a change, right? It looked like Drake Maye was now firmly behind Jacoby Brissett, at least for this set of OTAs. Do you think that means anything, Greg?
No, in my opinion, Nick, and I could be wrong because, again, this is a new regime. I think they wanted to see Drake tackle a little bit more. in this practice, and that doesn't mean that it's like solidified this way. I just think that, maybe he's earned the opportunity to get a few more reps. I do think Bailey Zappi did well with the reps that he did have, but I think they were just giving Maye a little bit of a carrot, and we'll have to see whether it continues. I remember something similar along these lines. I want to say, I don't know if it was with Mac Jones, sort of towards the tail end of OTAs his rookie year, sort of right before mandatory minicamp. They gave him an increase in reps, and look, that was a good thing for Mac, and we saw him flourish and eventually win the job after that. But I think that I wouldn't read a whole lot into it. But look, it's sort of once they start giving Drake Maye things as the third overall pick, it's hard to take them back. So I don't want to say it's not significant, but I don't want to say it's overly significant.
Let me ask you this. Do you think what happens today happens if Maye is not progressing, if they don't see that improvement, even if it's, as you said, baby steps, step by step, that improvement? Do you think they would give him this opportunity to slide behind Brissett if he was struggling a little bit more, if he wasn't showing that progress to his coaching staff?
Probably not. And I think it's a good point by you. I think they would have probably just left him where he was and just say, let's see him, keep making some sort of progress, or at least get going in the right direction more consistently. And to me, that they made this decision, does back up some of the things we've heard, not only from Alex Van Pelt, but from, other people like, Albert Breer said they're really happy with him. So I think this is a sign that he's tackling what they're giving him.
Does he look cleaner to you, Greg? You know what I mean? When you go back, and again, this has been a very short period of time. I'm not expecting gigantic leaps here, but as far as you said, he looks a little bit more in rhythm with the footwork. How about the whole package? Does he look a little bit cleaner today compared to 2-3 weeks ago?
I guess I would say yes. A little bit. I still don't love his motion. I don't like the hitch. We'll see whether that's a problem. Some guys have it, and they're just so talented that they overcome it, especially because of arm strength. So he could be one of those guys. And I wouldn't say the whole hitch thing is a huge concern right now. I do worry about, when those type of things kind of get exposed in the heat of camp against the first team defense and really experienced guys. And, even today, and I will say, in 7-on-7, Drake looks very clean, which is good. And I wouldn't necessarily say you expect that, but certainly the chances are increased because you're not dealing with a pass rush, you're not dealing with the offensive line. But like once the offensive line came on the field today, it was a complete train wreck for the offense. And it wasn't just Drake. I mean, he did throw 2 interceptions. One was a great diving play by Kyle Duggar. The other one, I couldn't tell whether he wanted to go short to Juju, but there was an over receiver as well, and he ended up just throwing it in between them right to some cornerback I've never heard of. So you worry about the stress of the situations of the pass rush and the offensive line and navigating all that stuff, whether that eliminates the progress that he has made with his footwork and things like that, because I think that's the whole thing. That's the biggest thing when we talk about how early can he start. You're just worried about if things aren't right around him, does he just revert back to what he was? And is that really the wisest thing for the New England Patriots?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I have yet to get my credential. Hopefully Captain Greg is working on that, and I can go to one of these practices with Greg, and he can really teach me the ropes, so I could study the offensive lineman, so he can teach me how to break down the beef up front. But reading the stuff on Twitter and just hearing you say that now, it seemed like it was a tale of 2 practices for the offense: 7-on-7s versus 11-on-11s. Let's start with the positive stuff, which was the 7-on-7s. What stood out to you during that period of time? I thought all the quarterbacks did a good job sort of,
throwing with anticipation. I thought they did a nice job to the boundary. They did some nice stuff towards the end line. I thought the receivers and tight ends and backs did a nice job. I'm just looking back at some of my stats, even though where was the 7-on-7? So red zone 7-on-7 was better. Brissett was 6 of 9 with 4 touchdowns. Maye was 3 of 4 with a touchdown. Zappi was 2 of 4 with 2 touchdowns. Milton, and basically the only reps he got was 1 of 4 with a touchdown. I mean, it was good. A lot of it was like buying time and just guys coming back. It was those type of touchdowns. There were a few, that were planned. But I thought the quarterbacks and the receivers and tight ends and backs, I thought they did a nice job working well together.
I had seen there was a lot of reaction about Pop Douglas's day. And of course, I think like when you're looking at this setup with, shells, shorts, T-shirts, Pop's going to be really difficult certain situations because he's just so damn quick. And, those kinds of players and wide receivers tend to have a pretty decent OTA, especially 7-on-7s because of the circumstances.
Yeah.
All right. So that is the 7-on-7s. Then we get to the 11-on-11s. And for the second straight time, I've seen this being reported by you and others. Last week kind of felt the same way. This team gets to 11-on-11s. There are issues. Greg, the first thing I have to ask you about is the offensive line. Mm-hmm. Again, now this is, I want to make sure I couch this. We're not jumping to any grand conclusions. At least I'm not. We're talking about OTAs. Mandatory minicamp is next week. We're still more than a month away from training camp, so those are all the caveats. With that said, watching this offensive line, how are you feeling?
From what I've seen from the last OTAs, and let's also put it in context because there's been a lot of guys missing, and or like City So was out last week. He was back today, but they were missing basically who you think are both going to be the starting offensive tackle. Chuck Okorafor and Michael Wenu was not out there. Jake Andrews, who's sort of the backup center, was not there, which meant Antonio Mafi had to play a lot more center, and he had a rough time with snaps, several high snaps. Couldn't even tell how well he was doing in pass protection. There was a lot of middle pressure, but just on what's out there, it wasn't good. I'm not panicking because look, the first unit was at left tackle from left to right. Calvin Anderson, City So, David Andrews, Michael Jordan, Caden Wallace. So Wallace, who we've heard they're going to make him a left tackle. Okorafor's not there, and all of a sudden he's over a right tackle. I don't really understand that. Mayo, again, foreshadowing before practice, talked about how these guys are versatile, and you're going to see some things, and don't read too much into who's with who and all that stuff. But that was a rough group, which led to an even rougher group. The second team was Tyrone Wheatley at left tackle, Nick Leverett, Antonio Mafi, Layden Robinson, and Vidarian Lowe. And, you look at those guys, So Andrews, out of all those guys, really, So and Andrews are the only guys that you could say right now are NFL starting caliber players. Yeah. So that it looked rough with the offensive line without NFL offensive linemen or guys, who have a chance, but we don't know yet. Obviously it was going to look rough, and it did. And so I'm not going to panic yet. I'm not. And, we'll see after mandatory minicamp. You'll be out there. Maybe. We'll see. I'm still waiting for Nick to slip me something. Well, let's see once everybody's out there and everybody's supposed to be there. Let's see how it is then. And then if it's still a train wreck, I'm going to sound the alarm bells.
PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. Seriously, I did it before. I was like, do. I did some on the golf recently. That was fun, watching along. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat predictions on Tuesdays, which increases your chances of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Friday. This week on Prize Picks, I'm really into the hockey, and the NBA is kind of a snooze. Go Celtics. Can't wait to watch you guys against Kyrie. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the hockey board, selecting Gustav Forsling over 1.5 shots on goal. Sam Bennett, hated in Boston, over 4 hits. Alexander Barkov, over 0.5 assists. That's easy. That's like taking money from a baby. And Chris Kreider, over 2.5 shots on goal. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first match deposit up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Sounding the alarm bells. This kind of leads me to my next question, Greg. I've been thinking about this the last couple of weeks. I think I covered it on my own solo podcast, the Nick Cattle Show, if you're wondering, on YouTube. How long? Let's say that there continues to be some issues up front, especially at that left tackle spot. Chuks Okorafor not looking comfortable. Again, this is all hypothetical. It might all work out, which would be fantastic. Right. But if it continues to kind of show itself as a problem, do you think Elliott Wolf, before it gets to, let's say, August, do you think he says, all right, we're gonna cut this thing off at the pass, and there's still a Charles Leno or a DJ Humphreys or a veteran tackle out there? We got to bring somebody in, because we cannot walk into the season with this being the case. Do you think he would pull the trigger on something like that, or will he continue to believe in his coaches and his film evaluation and really give this a shot through really all of the preseason?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, and I think this goes for a lot of decisions this team has to make, especially about what are they going to do at backup quarterback? When is Drake Maye going to play? Do they feel comfortable with him being a backup quarterback? I think a lot of those decisions, I think they'll probably reconvene maybe the end of this week, for the end of OTAs, and then they'll reconvene and have a discussion after mandatory minicamp right before everybody goes on break, instead of sort of sets the tone for training camp. I think there will be, depending on how mandatory minicamp looks, I think there will be a very serious discussion about they're going to have to go through this and be like, do we think this guy's going to be able to play this position, or do we think he's going to be able to play at all? And if there's a lot of negative talk during that meeting, then I think that Elliott Wolf has no choice but to go, dumpster diving on the, street free agents to, just bring in some guys. But I still have a lot of hope that this offensive line, provided, Scott Peters is worthy of the job, which I do think, there's a lot of guys in this category where we just don't know whether they're ready for a big boy role like this. But I think, whether it's a core 4 or whoever, I think you can figure out left tackle. So will be a left guard. He's fine. Andrews is fine. Who's going to be the right guard? All of a sudden I'm drawing a blank.
Is it Leverett?
It could be
Robinson.
Could be Robinson. Michael Jordan's been getting a lot of reps. I don't know. A lot of these guys, I'm not going to know about them as offensive linemen until I see the 1-on-1 in camp, and that sort of gives me a good baseline on where they are. Because you really can't judge offensive linemen until they have the pads on. You definitely can't. And so, and then at right tackle, you're going to have Big Michael Wenu. So, they should have enough to make it work. But yeah, I think if they get to the end of mandatory minicamp, they have that conversation, and there's some worries, then Wolf's going to have to do something sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I feel like 3 out of the 5 we should feel good about. Well, City So continued to improve last year. He should be steady at guard, whether it's on the left side or the right side, whatever. David Andrews is David Andrews, and I am confident that Michael Wenu will be a good right tackle, at least a good right tackle, if not better. So you got 3 out of the 5, and if you can get one of the Leverett, Robinson, Jordan group to work for you at right guard, then we're really only talking about left tackle, which brings me to kind of circle back to what you said about Caden Wallace. So Wallace is on the right side today. And I understand Gerard Mayo saying, hey, look, don't take too much out of this kind of stuff. People are going to be moving around. But to me, if you're really committed to transitioning Wallace from the right side to the left side, then I don't think he should touch the right side, like, at all.
Right.
I understand the idea of like, oh, well, if, Wenu was out, blah, blah, blah. But, hey, man, it feels to me, Greg, that is not a half-measure move. If you're going to move the guy from right to left, put him at left, let him continue to work at left, and see if he can make the damn thing work out, right?
Yeah, I was to see Caden Wallace today at right tackle, and I actually had to do a double take because I was, writing numbers down to the offensive lineman, and I was like, wait a minute, do I have the sides right? And I was like, no, he's at right tackle, and I was like, wow, that's kind of a bold move. I mean, if you're teaching this kid to go from right to left, like, why even mess with that? If you're dead set on him being a left tackle, and like, you can get into the whole, all right, well, I'm sure some people will be like, well, it could be a swing tackle on game day and like stuff like that. Okay, fine. But that's like middle, late camp stuff. Maybe some preseason game stuff. You don't do that in OTAs where you're trying to get everybody's feet wet. You're trying to get them trained. You're trying to give them a foundation for what you're going to do in training camp. That they moved him over to right tackle today definitely was something I looked at curious. I was very curious about that.
And on top of it, you put the Okora for meeting with the media, where he didn't necessarily sound like he was doing cartwheels about moving to the left side. Didn't sound like he was super confident in that idea. And we'll see how all of it works out.
The Celtics are in the NBA Finals, and I can tell you, Nick is very excited. Celtics will have home court, so possibly 4 games at TD Garden. How awesome would it be to go to a game and experience that atmosphere and get to hate on Kyrie? Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat. I love that. I have to see the view from my seat before I purchase any tickets. It's right there in the app. And their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. I was just looking at the app for Game 1 and saw a ton of discounts being offered. Like, seriously, it says like, $49 off, $100 off. Of course, the price tags are expensive. Not outrageous if you're a hoop head and planning on going to the NBA Finals. Like I said, love getting a panoramic view from the seat in the app before I buy. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Purchase the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, let's look at the other side of the football. You mentioned the offensive line was kind of all over the place. It was scattered with people out, absences, all that good stuff. But defense really dominated, Greg, the 11-on-11s. Just watching these guys play on that side of the football, my first question is, anything stick out to you that is different than what you've seen in prior years under Bill Belichick and with Steve Belichick there calling plays?
These guys, I mean, I know Keon White downplayed it, but these guys continue to stand up more on the edge, more than I've ever seen them do, and that continued today. It's sort of the same stuff in terms of scheme, movement, defensive linemen slanting one way to create a hole where a linebacker runs through, or a safety. Like I saw a linebacker, Christian Ellis, came in like unblocked. And let me also point out that like the line was so bad at some points. For example, okay, so this was regular team period. This was in the middle of the field. This was not red zone. It was Brissett handed off, sack. Maye had a short completion, handed off, interception. Then, like, later on, there was, for team red zone in the team period, Stevenson runs for like -5 yards. Brissett incomplete. He threw to Stevenson, but he threw even before Stevenson even came close to getting out of his break because there was so much pressure on Brissett. Incomplete to Hunter Henry, complete to Kayshon Boutte for a touchdown, who I thought he did some nice things in practice. Maye got in there, sack up the middle unblocked, Michael Jordan false start, check down, scramble after a high snap, interception to a diving Kyle Duggar. That kind of stuff, just kept going on. But I do think that, Christian Barmore was back. He had missed the previous one that we saw, and he was a complete force on the inside. I will say, Christian Gonzalez took part in a lot more today than we have seen. He makes a big difference. And you also have to look at, they don't have Kendrick Bourne. Javon Baker was out today. There was another receiver. Tyquan Thornton did individual stuff, but he didn't do team. And so also factoring into this is that they're not getting a lot of separation on the outside. So you marry the pass rush with, good coverage, not great work by the receivers, and you have really bad offense.
Defensively, they were a top 10 defense in DVOA last year. They obviously have the really tough schedule this season as far as quarterbacks go. I mean, they're really going to face a murderer's row. They've got their own quarterbacks in the division with Rodgers, Allen, and Tua. They've got to play Stafford. They've got to play Caleb Williams in that Chicago offense. They've got to play Burrow. You get the point. Going in, though, you've got Judon coming back. You've got Gonzalez coming back. You've got Marcus Jones coming back. You've got Barmore taking that step. Kind of right now as we get ready for mandatory minicamp, Greg, how do you feel about this defense as far as reasonable expectations go? With the schedule as a given, with the coaching situation as well, how do you feel about those guys going into this year?
I feel good about them. It's funny, I was having a conversation with Gasper after we did television, I think on Sunday night, and we were having a conversation about this. And look, provided Judon's back in the mix and, getting Gonzalez back, I do think in previous years this defense was a little inflated, by some of their performances against bad quarterbacks and bad teams. But, I think this defense should be good. I mean, they're going to have to be, for this team to have a chance to be competitive. And so, I think they're going to be really good. Do I still have concerns about linebacker and things like that? And what are they going to do with free safety? Things that have to be sorted out. I do, but I still expect them to hold their own. I expect them at least to be, somewhere around 10 at least in the league. And as long as the offense can do a better job of hanging on to the ball, not turning the ball over, not putting them in tough circumstances, then I think that's the path for this team to be competitive.
Anybody else stand out today that you haven't mentioned?
I thought some, positive and negatives. KJ Osborne has had a tough time catching the ball in the 3 practices that we've seen.
Oh, that's good.
Now, I know that was an issue for him last year in Minnesota, but everybody thought that was the sort of the outlier because normally he's been fine, but last year it drops were a problem for him, and it looks like that's continuing. So that's not great. I will say, so Joe Milton didn't have a lot to do in this practice, and he certainly took advantage of his downtime by dancing a lot of practice, and him and Pop Douglas were kind of doing it. And this is during individual stuff, and at first I was like, oh, that's cute. He's got some good moves, the big fella, and but he kept doing it, and it started to annoy me, and I'm be like, don't we have any effing work to do? Shouldn't you be doing something mental reps or something? I didn't see Drake Maye doing that. I didn't see Jacoby Brissett or Bailey Zappi, cutting a rug, but Joe Milton was having a blast. One thing we haven't talked about, Nick, that I heard somebody else mention, and they were right. Ramondre Stevenson, to me, looks like he has shed a lot of weight. He looks much smaller than I remember him, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if we've talked to him yet. But maybe it's sort of like a contract year for him. We'll see what the Patriots do, whether they extend him or not, but maybe he's looking to be provide more big plays, a little bit more speed, maybe a little bit more out of the backfield just to increase his big playability. So I thought that was interesting. Mentioned Christian Barmore. Alex Austin, the cornerback, I will say he continues to stand out. Mayo talked today about, he said by the end of last season, they came to the realization that he was an NFL caliber player. And I'm sure you probably remember some of the discussion. Certainly some people on Twitter like to remind me of this. I love how people get butthurt on behalf of athletes. But after Alex Austin's first game, I was like, he's not an NFL player. I will say by the end of the season, I changed my opinion. And I did think that he was a good, solid, 6th, 7th type of defensive back. But I do think he's showing well on the field. Jalen Polk, I love watching him in individual drills. Now, it doesn't amount to much. There's no defense out there. But, his route running, he was returning kicks today in some of the special teams and showed a little bit of burst. I don't know. Jalen Polk's just a guy I like to watch practice. And I think people are going to be really happy with him. Maybe not the huge upside of other people that, right. that they wanted the Patriots to draft. But right. all I think of when I watch Polk is he's at the very minimum, he's going to be Jacoby Myers, but better. Jacoby Myers was a really good player. He just, didn't have much in terms of separation or, all that stuff. But Polk just reminds me a lot of Jacoby Myers. He's just a better athlete and a little bit more fluid, and I really enjoy watching him play.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Polk Myers thing because, some of the scouting reports would say that Polk is Jacoby Myers with a little more juice. And I went back and I looked at their combine numbers, and a lot of things are similar, man. Height, weight, and stuff like that is very similar. Their vertical leap is very similar. But when you look at, the 10-second split, Polk's got Myers. When you look at the 40-yard dash, he's got Myers. When you look at the broad jump, he's got and those kinds of tests show explosivity. So you kind of get the idea of same size, same kind of feel, but just a little bit more juice. And so if he can bring that to the field, look, I really like the player. I watched him play a number of times at Washington. He's not one of those guys that I just watched highlights on Twitter. I watched Washington a few times this past year. I like him. I think he's a very high floor, guy. I think he's going to contribute in year one. I can't wait to see him out there playing. We've got a couple more things to cover with Greg. But first, this episode brought to you by Prize Picks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download that app today. Use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Also, you want to check out the crew at BSJ, $50 for the year. Bedard and Giardi all over the Patriots. And, of course, John Corrales getting you all sorts of warmed up for the NBA Finals, which tip off on Thursday night. Drake Maye met with the media after the OTA practice today, Greg. Anything of note that he said, or just kind of it was what it was and we can move on?
To tell you the truth, I was not there for that. That was Giardi's purview, and he he has a Drake Maye story waiting for me to read right now. So I did not listen to the big fella, but from what I see, just kind of, the normal stuff.
All right, the last thing I want to talk about, unless you got something else you want to talk about, is Justin Jefferson. Because I do think I actually just did a podcast on this today. A lot of people kind of, we get dragged into the thought process of, well, that's somebody else. That's somebody else on somebody else's team, and that's not going to really impact the Patriots. But I think the Justin Jefferson contract impacts the Patriots, Greg. This is a team that's looking for a wide receiver one. We all know it. And Jefferson's contract, let me just give people the feel of Jefferson's deal, because Greg and I always talk about NFL contracts and how there's always funny money involved. There's fugazi numbers at the back end to make the contract look bigger so the agent can walk around with his chest out like, I just, conquered the world. That's what happens. But Jefferson's contract is different. Jefferson's contract is the real deal. And Mike Florio had the details. Jefferson's going to get $88.743 million fully guaranteed at his signing. The practical guarantees are $95.743 million. And Florio writes that it's far more likely that Jefferson will definitely be paid over $125 million over 4 years. Brad Spielberger, who used to project contracts for Pro Football Focus and now works as the Director of Football Administration at Grand Central Sports Management, he tweeted about the deal and said, very real. This is a way bigger jump to the wide receiver market than it ever appears or even appears. David Lombardi, Athletic, covers the 49ers. Obviously, he has a vested interest in this because of the Brandon Ayuk story. Lombardi tweeted out, most fully guaranteed money wide receivers. And when you look at this deal, Greg, Tyreek Hill, before Justin Jefferson signed this contract, Tyreek Hill, he had $52.5 million fully guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Between Tyreek Hill and Jefferson, there is a more than $36 million gap of fully guaranteed money. This Justin Jefferson contract reminds me of the Deshaun Watson contract with the Cleveland Browns. When Watson signed that deal with Cleveland, every team was pissed because Cleveland literally handed hundreds of millions of dollars to Deshaun Watson guaranteed. And every team that had a quarterback looking for a new deal knew we're going to go up the creek without a paddle because Cleveland decided to do that contract. So you kind of put all the pieces together, Greg. This Jefferson contract just exploded. The market is just bananas right now. Do you think that makes it less likely that Elliott Wolf would now look at somebody like a Brandon Ayuk, maybe even, I don't think it's going to actually come to fruition, but CeeDee Lamb? Do you think he's less apt to look at players like that now? Because if you're bringing Ayuk in, it's no longer $55 million guaranteed that you're looking at. It could be $70 to $75 million fully guaranteed that you're looking at.
Yeah, I to tell you the truth, I don't know. I mean, it all depends on like the deal. Like, look, I don't think the 49ers are giving up Brandon Ayuk. I don't think the Bengals are giving up T. Higgins.
Agree.
We're going back to like, if they wanted to bring in a receiver, it's going to have to be somebody like Cortland Sutton, somebody like that, who we talked about a few pods ago, where he was only looking now, him looking for $15-16 million a year looks like freaking changing your couch compared to like what Justin Jefferson. I mean, $89 million guaranteed for a wide receiver. I mean, it's obscene. I mean, good for him, but like if I'm Elliott Wolf, I'm still looking for sort of those secondary wide receivers, maybe guys who haven't popped yet, like a Cortland Sutton, who have potential to be a number one type of guy. I'm not saying he's definitely that type, but has the potential. But I've always thought this, at least going back to my Packers days, and I think it's Elliott Wolf's preference to do just about everything, but especially wide receivers through the draft and just drafting, developing. And when they get priced out, if they don't want to sign, sort of here for like a team-friendly deal, then you bid them adieu and you have somebody else, in the works. I mean, with the Packers, it was, Donald Driver and Greg Jennings and, Jordy Nelson and James Jones. And, you looked at the Packers, they had Devontae Adams. They ended up trading him. And they traded it out for a bunch of rookies, and it took a little time to work, but now it looks like it's gangbusters. And now I think they have the cheapest wide receiver room in the league, and those guys could be in the Super Bowl this year. So I think that's always Elliott Wolf's preference. I do think he's trying to find maybe a stopgap guy so they can build that up, but I don't think he's going to get too pricey with it.
All right, he's Greg. I'm Nick. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. We put a bow on it. We're back later this week. Until then, be well.